All right, so you're the kind of person who wants to know what's up, like get to the heart of things, right? You don't want to mess around. So let's just cut right to the chase and talk about something that might surprise you about, well, fasting.
Fasting.
Yeah, fasting. We're not just
Ugh.
talking about like, oh, skipping a meal or two, you know? We're going depth on how your brain like actually perceives that you're
Yeah.
fasting. And it turns out it's got way more control over your body's defenses than anyone thought.
Interesting. For a long time, the way we understood fasting was all about what you weren't eating. That's what we focused on, like
Yeah.
a nutrient-centric view, right?
Right, exactly. Like the main thing was always about the change in blood sugar or you're not taking in calories, and that's what drives all the benefits. But there's this new research published in Science Immunology, and it kind of throws a wrench in that whole idea. There might be something else going on here, a more direct link between fasting and the body's response.
It seems like this study is showing us there's a really important and underestimated role that the brain plays when we fast, especially when it comes to the immune system.
So the big question we're diving into today is how does fasting really affect our health and how long we live? And what is this surprise connection to our brain all about? We're going to dig into this new research, break it down, and try to understand how the brain, like this command center in our head, is calling the shots for our immune system when we're fasting.
Okay, so to start, let's talk about what we already know. The traditional view, right?
Yeah.
Most people thought that the good things that happen when we fast, less inflammation, for example, happen because our metabolism changes. Blood sugar goes down, some nutrients drop, and that starts a chain reaction in the body.
Yeah, makes sense. The body reacts because there's no food coming in.
Right. But this new research, it suggests there's something more going on. It's saying there's a direct pathway, a neural pathway, straight from the brain to the immune system, and it gets turned on when we fast.
Oh, wow, a direct line. So then what part of the brain is doing all this?
The hypothalamus,
Mhm.
this part of the brain, it's like this control hub for a lot of what our body does. And a big thing it controls is our hunger and when we feel full.
Right, the hypothalamus,
Yeah.
like mission control for our appetite. And I read about these AgRP and POMC neurons. They're in the hypothalamus, right? And they play the key role here. So tell me more about those.
Yeah, you got it. Okay, so AgRP neurons, those are the ones sending out the I'm hungry signals. When they're active, we feel that hunger and it makes us want to eat. And then there's the POMC neurons. They do the opposite. They're the I'm full signals.
So it makes sense that they'd be involved in how our bodies deal with fasting. But then there's that experiment with the mice, right? That's where things get really interesting. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is really cool. So in this experiment, they activated the AgRP neurons, the hunger signals, in mice that weren't actually fasting. They were eating normally. And what they found was that these mice had fewer pro-inflammatory monocytes, just like what happens when you fast for 20 hours.
Wait, so the mice weren't even actually fasting, but their bodies acted like they were. That's wild.
Exactly. And there's another key point here. Their blood sugar didn't drop. So it wasn't just a simple reaction to not having food. It seems like the brain itself was triggering these changes in the immune system.
Wow. So the brain is like, hey, I'm thinking about food, time to act like we're fasting.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And then, to really nail it down, they did the opposite experiment. They stimulated the POMC neurons, the full signals, in mice that were actually fasting. And guess what? It reversed the effect. More monocytes popped up, even though the mice were still without food.
No way. So even when the body's fasting, if the brain thinks you're full, it can mess with those normal immune changes that happen when you don't eat. That's incredible. So hold on, let's talk about these monocytes for a sec. What exactly are they, and why is it good that they go down during fasting?
Sure. Monocytes, they're a type of white blood cell. White blood cells are part of our immune system, our defense system, and monocytes are important for inflammation. When something's wrong, like an injury or an infection, they go to that spot and help clean things up, start the healing process. But if there are too many monocytes all the time, that can cause problems. It can lead to chronic inflammation, which is linked to a bunch of diseases.
Gotcha. So fasting helps lower the number of those monocytes, and that's a good thing for our health. And what this study is showing is that the brain can make that happen just by sending signals.
That's right. It's not just that the brain notices there's no food. It's actively telling the immune system to act like the body is fasting, even if it's not. And there's this molecule, this CCL2, that seems to be a key part of that communication. It's like a messenger between the brain and the immune cells.
Okay, CCL2. So what does it do?
CCL2, it's a cytokine. Think of it like a signal flare that tells the monocytes, hey, come over here. It attracts them from the bone marrow into the blood and tissues. And the study found that when those AgRP neurons, the hunger signals, were turned on, the levels of CCL2 actually went down.
So fewer signal flares, fewer monocytes rushing in, less inflammation. Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And to really prove that the brain is in control here, they did something interesting. They gave the mice extra CCL2 from the outside. And that partially reversed what the AgRP neurons were doing. The monocytes went back up, even though the brain was still saying, hey, we're hungry.
Wow, that's a pretty clear sign that the brain is actively managing those monocyte levels.
Absolutely. Now, this study also looked at something called mTOR. It's involved in aging and how cells grow. And what they found there is super interesting, too.
Oh yeah, mTOR. I know it's linked to how long we live and all that. So what's the connection between the brain and mTOR in this study?
Okay, so mTOR, it's like a control panel for cell growth, how the body uses energy and aging. And we know that when mTOR activity goes down, it's usually good. It can mean a longer lifespan and better resistance to stress. And we also know that fasting usually makes mTOR activity go down, especially in the liver.
Right, and that's thought to be one reason why fasting might help us live longer.
Exactly. Now, here's where it gets crazy. They found that activating those AgRP neurons, the hunger signals, could also suppress mTOR activity in the liver. And remember, these mice weren't even fasting. Their nutrient levels were normal.
You're kidding. So just the thought of being hungry can make the liver act like it's actually fasting.
That's what it looks like. And to make things even more convincing, they did one more thing. They stopped the mTOR suppression from happening, and guess what? The reduction in monocytes that usually comes with fasting, that was blocked too.
Hold on, so it's like a chain reaction. The brain thinks about food, sends a signal, the liver's mTOR gets suppressed, and then the immune cells change? It's like the brain is controlling everything?
That's a great way to think about it. It's like the brain is flipping these switches in the liver based on how much food it thinks is available. And those switches control what happens with the immune system. You mentioned the fly-by-wire model earlier.
Right, fly-by-wire. I'm curious about that.
So fly-by-wire is something they use in airplanes. It means that when the pilot moves the controls, it doesn't directly move the parts of the plane. The signals go through a computer first. It's like the brain in this study. It's sending these electronic signals that can override or change what's happening in the body, even if there's no actual change in nutrients.
So the brain isn't just reacting to what's going on in the body, it's actively taking charge. It's sending orders. And this has some pretty big implications, right? If we can get those fasting-like benefits without actually having to fast, that opens up a lot of possibilities.
Huge possibilities. Think about conditions where there's too much inflammation, like autoimmune diseases, or when the immune system is weak, like during infections or with cancer. Maybe we could develop treatments that target these pathways in the brain and control the immune system without needing people to make huge changes to their diet.
So it's not just about what we eat or when we eat anymore. We might be able to affect our health by learning how to hack these connections between the brain and the immune system. That's mind-blowing.
It really is, and it really challenges the idea that the only way to get those benefits is through restricting what you eat. But there's also a word of caution here. The study mentions that some recent research has linked certain types of fasting to heart problems. So it's not like fasting is a cure-all, and we still need to understand how all this works to make sure it's safe and effective.
Right. Good point. This isn't about throwing out everything we know about nutrition. It's about adding another layer of understanding, another tool in the toolbox. Maybe by figuring out these brain signals, we can find better ways to use fasting or even copy some of its benefits without the risks.
Absolutely. To really drive this point home, let's hear what the researchers themselves said. Dr. Giuseppe D'Agostino, he said, and I quote, "Our perceptions can shape our bodies in ways we don't always notice. This study reminds us that even our internal body adjustments that are not under conscious control respond to the brain's signals."
That's powerful. It's like our minds can really influence our physical state. It's not just about the food itself, it's how our brain sees it.
And Professor Matt Hepworth, he said, this work challenges the long-standing view that fasting's immunological impact is driven purely by nutrient levels. It highlights the nervous system's profound influence on how the immune system adapts during fasting. So they're basically saying this is a big deal, a real game changer.
Okay, so to sum it all up, the main message here is that our body and mind are in constant communication. And this study shows us a way that our brain, specifically how it senses hunger, can have a major impact on our immune system and even affect things like aging. It's not just the absence of food, it's how our brain understands that absence.
And figuring out these pathways, like how the brain talks to the immune system and the liver when we're hungry, that could lead to some really cool new ways to improve health, live longer, and even treat diseases.
Yeah.
It's not just about what's not on your plate, it's about what your brain thinks is on your plate.
So for everyone listening, here's the takeaway. There's this whole hidden world of how our brain controls our body, and this research shines a light on one part of it. It's not just about what you eat, it's about how your brain experiences hunger. That can trigger a whole cascade of changes, from your immune cells to your liver, and even things related to how you age.
And that makes you wonder, right? What if we could learn to control those brain signals? Could we improve our health without needing to go on crazy diets? Makes you think about the power our minds have over our bodies.
For sure. And it just goes to show we're always learning new things about how our bodies work. So stay curious, keep asking questions, and who knows what we'll discover next. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.